For 5 years, a resident of San Diego kept a terrible secret. To the outside world, he was a normal man, a carpet cleaner who they let into their homes and businesses. But in reality, he was a vicious, Ripper-style murderer waiting for his next opportunity. He was convicted for the brutal murder of 2 women and a 3-year-old boy, but avoided conviction for 3 other murders he was suspected of committing. One victim survived her horrific injuries and was able to confirm the identity of her attacker. David Allen Lucas, the San Diego Ripper. David Allen Lucas was born in 1956 and had a rough childhood. He suffered from asthma and bedwetting. Growing up, he was an altar boy and was said to love animals, but both his parents were abusive and took turns domineering their son, with the mom working nights and his dad working during the day. At age 16, his perspective changed when his girlfriend aborted their child. Lucas told a court psychiatrist that from that moment on, he hated women. And in 1973, he was convicted of assaulting a woman at knife point. He did later get married, but was constantly worried about how his wife was raising their child. In 1979, when Lucas was 23 years old, the murders began. On May 4th, 31-year-old Suzanne Jacobs was at home with her 3-year-old son, Colin. Her husband, Michael, left home around 6 a.m. for work, and around 8 a.m., a neighbor saw a maroon sports car parked in their driveway. Both the neighbor and her husband tried calling that morning, but neither call was answered. A delivery that the family was expecting was left on the front porch after no one came to the door to receive it. Around 5 p.m., Michael came home and found a horrific scene. The bathroom was drenched in blood, and just inside the bedroom, 3-year-old Colin lay dead. Michael ran to a neighbor for help, and they discovered Suzanne further inside the master bedroom. When police arrived, they were able to determine what had happened, but at this point, they did not know who committed the crime. The volume of blood in the bathroom led investigators to believe that Colin's throat had been cut there, but he survived long enough to stumble down the hall to the bedroom where he died. His bloody footprints showed the path he had taken. Inside the bedroom was evidence of a struggle. Suzanne was still clutching several strands of blonde hair. Both victims were killed with extreme violence. Colin's neck was slashed twice, and he had cuts on his fingers, likely from trying to push away the knife. Suzanne's neck had 6 distinct cuts, as well as 3 stab wounds, one above her collarbone, one in the heart, and one in her stomach. Her neck also showed signs of strangulation. The home had smears of blood in various places, such as the kitchen sink area where the killer had washed off his victim's blood. There was also a partially drank glass of wine, and the TV was left on. Bloody boot prints were left around the victims and leading to the sink. There was also an insurance form from Love Insurance that would be crucial years later at David's trial. On June 8th of 1984, Lucas kidnapped 34-year-old Jody Santiago Robertson as she was walking to her brother's apartment. She left a nearby restaurant around 10:30 p.m., and as she entered the apartment parking lot, a man came from behind and put a knife to her throat. He ordered her to be silent and hurried her into a dark brown sports car and drove off. David Lucas drove to where he was living and forced her inside. Once inside, he strangled her until she was unconscious. The next morning, 2 women found her bleeding and partially nude, just a mile from David's home. Her neck and fingers had deep gashes, and she also had a skull fracture. But against all odds, she survived the horrific attack. Her testimony would be instrumental in the case against David Lucas. The other murder that David Lucas was convicted of occurred on November 20th, 1984. 22-year-old Anne Swank was on her way home after visiting her boyfriend when her car ran out of gas. She was last seen by a gas station attendant after midnight and a passing driver who saw her using a gas can to fill her vehicle. The motorist also saw a second car pull up and a man get out and either embrace or grab Swank before he was out of sight. Her body was discovered on November 24th near Spring Valley, California. She was face down in the mud, and the only clothing she had on below the waist were her socks. Around her neck was a dog collar, and her clothing had been cut with a knife to expose her body. Her slashed pants were found nearby, still zipped and buttoned. It was determined that her neck had 11 distinct slashes that appeared to have been done in a sawing motion. Lucas took several days off work after the disappearance of Swank, and his roommates reported deep scratches on his face. He became a person of interest when his home and vehicle were identified by his surviving victim. Blood testing was done comparing him to the DNA evidence that was found under Swank's fingernails, and it came back as a potential match. Further evidence that Lucas was the killer came when bloodstains in his vehicle came back with the same blood type as Swank. It would be quite some time before the verdict came in, but his guilt in the murders of Swank and the attack on Robertson seemed clear, and investigators had also tied him to 4 other murders with similar MOs. His work boots at the time of the Jacob murders was a match to the prints that were found in the home. Handwriting analysis came back matching his writing to that found on the insurance note. It was also discovered that he had a contract with Love Insurance, reinforcing these test results. A man had been in custody for the Jacobs murders, but the charges were dropped as the noose tightened on Lucas. When it was determined that he had been driving his mother's car, which fit the description of the vehicle seen outside the Jacobs home, another guilty verdict seemed assured. And indeed, he was found guilty of the murder of Anne Swank as well as Suzanne and Colin Jacob in June of 1989 and sentenced to death. The murders that he avoided conviction for were the murder of 24-year-old Rhonda Strang and 3-year-old Amber Fisher on October 23, 1984, and 30-year-old Gail Garcia on December 8, 1981. All 3 had their throats cut similar to the other victims of Lucas, but other suspects or a lack of evidence led to him being acquitted in these cases. David Lucas is currently on death row in San Quentin prison.